And today we're going to do a video that I think is long overdue, and that is a good explanation of rates and how to use them in your flying, and also how to make you fly better by utilizing your rates properly. I think it's a really common mistake that's done all the time. People flying 3D completely their entire flight envelope on high rates, or maybe not using enough rates to get full potential out of it, or being so afraid of high rates, having them even exist in your radio, that you don't even want to set them up. But high rates, even with the jet and even with the scale model, have a role. For instance, high rates, you can see on this, is very extreme. But on a warbird, as you're taking off, I've discussed in my landing and takeoff videos that you need to take off and land on high rates. Just make sure you have enough Expo. The main reason is that high rates give you the greater chance of recovery when you're very close to the ground and very slow. Because when you're moving slow, the flight surfaces have a lot less effect. The other thing I want to kind of introduce with the concept of utilizing rates to improve your flying is setting multiple rates. Let me show you what I mean. Okay, I use a single flight mode switch. That is very easy to program, and maybe we can do that in a future video. But for right now, I put all of my rates, elevator and aileron, I have them set on one switch. Now, I set 4 rates on a lot of my 3D planes because some of them on the full 3D rates just don't want a rolling Harrier very well. They just have a little bit of too much control, or maybe the ailerons are a little too fast. So in this case, for full 3D rates, I generally max everything out, which is this is all I can get from the elevator. Okay, all I can get from the rudder. The ailerons I like to set at 45 degrees, and I talked to Daniel Dominguez about all of this, and his thoughts on it were exactly the same. That when you get a little over 45 degrees with the ailerons, it doesn't mean that there's not a place for that, and you can set a rate for that. But what we're talking about is when the ailerons get past 45 degrees, which a lot of planes can get there, what happens is it reduces the prop wash on the tail and basically washes that air that could be flowing over the tail section, and it diminishes it. So basically what happens is we want to keep them at 45. They'll obviously, you'll get that rotation, they'll be very fast, but it won't cause you any problems with kind of compromising the effectiveness of the tail. The next concept when it comes to rates is setting multiples. The reason I set multiples is that once I take off and start moving faster, having this much control is absolutely pointless. Because to be honest with you, this plane, if I'm flying at a reasonable clip, even with only this much, this plane will do a 15-foot loop. So what exactly is the point of having all that extra? Because you're really only using this much. So in order to fly really smooth and look really precise, we need to dial the rates down. So at max, we only have maybe 20 to 30% of this. And then of course, a lot less Expo. But the bottom line is, as we're moving the sticks back and forth, as we're pulling on the elevator, everything will be significantly smoother because the resolution is really higher. Same thing with rudders, same thing with the ailerons. My 3 rates are very simple. I set 1 for 3D, which is, I really just work around and find the sweet spot for rolling Harriers and to get up in a hover and things like that. And that takes a little time and a few flights. So work with it. Try different rates and see if it responds a little better. Don't just set it at 100 and leave it. The second rate I use is what I call a snap rate. And that means my rudder and elevator are at a really nice precision rate. I have a little extra rudder in there, but my ailerons are very fast. And I also have a fair amount of Expo in there because when I'm trying to fly precisely, I want to make sure it's not too twitchy. But I have full ailerons because when I get into a snap and I want to do a real quick snap or 1.5 snaps or anything like that that requires real fast ailerons, I need them, so I set them high. So rudder elevator low and the ailerons on high. That is my number 2 rate. That is a snap rate. The number 3 rate is going to be what would be a low rate. That means I'm flying at 3/4 throttle or better, and I'm flying very fast and trying to fly precise lines. When I'm trying to fly precise lines, I'm really looking at everything being real slow and smooth and deliberate. So I cut the rates back even more, and I even cut the ailerons back. For instance, if I'm doing a long, slow roll and I have the aileron set a little fast, what happens is it'll look a little twitchy. It won't roll smoothly. So when I do that, by cutting down the rates on the ailerons, because I know I'm not going to do a snap roll, I'm completely good with the fact that everything's rolling a little slower and smoothly. And then you just adjust those things to your liking. You know, maybe you don't want to set them too slow. Maybe you want to set them ultra slow, so you could put the stick almost all the way over. Whatever makes you comfortable. But if you use the rates properly, you'll fly better. You will look better and you'll fly better. The most common mistake that I ever see is having too little rates when you're landing and too much rates when you're flying fast. Frankly, if I'm flying a turbine jet or a real speedy plane like a pylon racer or something like that, you know, this elevator barely has to move to have a lot of control. So if you want to still look smooth, fly smoothly, and that, you need the rates very low. But when you're coming in for a landing, you need to switch. I'm going to make a plea to all of you. Get used to switching rates. If you switch rates, every part of your flight envelope will look good. It will be smooth, and you'll have the proper rates. What I'm trying to do now with my plane is also set a 4th rate, and I call that a tumbling rate. Some of the planes have so much elevator. They go up to 60 degrees. That is absolutely pointless for everything unless you want to tumble. There is almost nothing that can benefit from that much throw. So the same thing with the ailerons. You can set a rate that gives you maximum of everything, but just make sure if you want a dedicated 3D rate, it'll enable you to do the maneuvers smooth and nice. Once again, I want you to get used to flipping rates. You know, again, when I'm taking off with the 3D plane, it's one of the few examples where I don't take off on a high rate. I only do that because my first maneuver, a lot of times, is like a quick knife edge right off the ground or something like that. And high rates tend to make me get a little crazy. And there's so much throw in these anyway that I'm pretty safe on my snap rate. There are notable exceptions. There are a ton of pilots out there, even great ones, that fly everything on high rates. They just use Expo very creatively. But I'm just not a fan of that. You know, the electronics in your radio can help you fly better, so why not do it? You don't even have to practice. All you have to do is set the rates up properly, and you will fly better. You'll look better, and you'll fly better. You know, as I take off and start my first couple of maneuvers, generally I know I'm flying more precision. So I immediately keep it on or flip to low rates or that snap rate. And I only switch to 3D rates when I'm starting to get down and I realize, okay, I'm gonna hover, do a parachute, something that I'm gonna get the plane slow. When I'm harrying, you always need a high rate or a 3D rate. When we're moving into things like jets and things like that, it doesn't seem like it, but the rate switches are equally important. Just because it's not 3D doesn't mean that you don't have to switch back and forth between rates. Take off on high rates. Once you get going and you're flying normally, go ahead and find a rate that's nice and smooth. But if you're going to do real high speed, get a rate that's even lower, but make sure you switch off of it when the time comes, if you're going to fly the jet a little slower. Same goes with warbirds and things like that. But for the most part, as long as the plane is set up properly, and if you watch my other videos, you'll see that our travel adjusts have to be set properly before we do anything, and our linkages have to be set properly. But once you are finally ready to work with your rates, please make sure that you do a lot of experimenting, fly and change the rates, just to feel it out. Eventually you'll have a plane that just flies perfectly. To have your low rate set properly, you need to make sure that it's not too high. A lot of times, I believe that in order to fly really smoothly, the elevator needs to be in a very controllable condition, which means you need to actually move the stick a little bit to get a result. And if there's not enough expo or anything else like that, you'll end up being a little twitchier than you want to be. The whole point behind low rates is to make the plane docile and controllable while in flight. Low rates are not necessarily for landing. They are for flying much faster and flying straight lines. Now, finding a good 3D rate does not just mean putting everything at 100%. You need to play with it. You need to start doing rolling Harriers or rolling the plane and watching how it responds. If the plane is turning too much too soon, you might not have enough expo, or vice versa. The right rate is not just having all that is available. Having the right rate really means being able to execute the maneuvers that you want to where they look their best. And that means my advice to you is play with it. Don't just settle for 100% and that's what the plane does and that's how the plane actually does a rolling Harrier. Because if you want it to behave differently, you can set the program to actually make it respond the way you want it to. There are a lot of maneuvers that will benefit from the proper rates. I discuss rolling Harriers because a lot of pilots really want to learn this maneuver, and it is really sensitive to the amount of input you're putting in. Sometimes it's a little hard to take the stick back and forth, left to right really strong, and a little less expo will make you not have to deflect it so much to have the roll stay nice. Conversely, too little expo can make it so sensitive and the plane will just start turning when you don't want it to. It is hard to really time the rudder just right to either fly straight or alter direction. This video only has one purpose, and that is to make your flying better. Please try to experiment, especially with your favorite planes, and change the rates around a little bit to find what suits you and the plane best.